always forget to plan the intros for my videos, and it's always a disaster. There's like 5 minutes every time of me just sitting here going, what should I say? Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year to everybody, and now that December 2020 is over, let's do my reading wrap-up. The first book I finished in December was The Man Who Invented Christmas by Standiford. This is a brief biography of Charles Dickens, in theory centered around his writing of A Christmas Carol, which does feature prominently, but it also follows him from basically his childhood all the way through his death, so it's not strictly about that period of his life. It is about him in general, which I appreciated because I didn't know that much about him. It's also theoretically about how A Christmas Carol sort of helped revive our Christmas spirit. I didn't find that to be the case, but you can watch my vlog and review up here and decide for yourself. The second book I finished in December was Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is the second Poirot novel that I have read, but I jumped ahead in the series because I was really excited about the movie that was supposed to come out, I think on December 18th, and then of course it got pushed because COVID. So by the time I realized it got pushed, I was halfway through the book and I decided to finish it anyways, which I'm glad I did, because this book felt like two books. The first half, before the murder actually takes place, is basically just setting the stage and introducing all the characters, because there's a lot of different characters in this one and a lot of people who don't know each other or don't seem to know each other. And I did not like that half of the book. Basically every character is awful in some way or another. There's no character that you read about and go, you're a sweetheart, I care about you. Everyone's just being horrible and racist and sexist, and like, I get it, I know it's to be expected, but it was so over the top in this one, I found, that I just found it really hard to get into that first half when all we're doing is meeting these characters. Then, once the murder had happened, I was hooked. I was so into it at that point, because then things were actually happening and we were getting these characters interacting in tense situations and like, who's lying, who's telling the truth, what's going on here? That part was really good. I found the mystery part super interesting. It took me like a week to read the first half of this book because I just wasn't interested in picking it up. And then one night I thought, oh well, I haven't been liking this much. I'll pick it up and read a chapter before bed and finish the second half in one sitting because I was just so gripped. And at that point I'm like, okay, I need to know what happens next. I need to know what happens next. However, because half of the book sucked, I couldn't like it that much, even if the second half was good. In keeping with the festive season, I read Yule, A Celebration of Warmth and Light by Dorothy Morrison. This was quick, it was engaging, but it wasn't that good. From the get-go, there were several statements made where I sort of went, I'm not an expert on this, but that seems wrong. That does not seem correct. And as the book progressed, especially with regards to anything talking about the history of Yule and the history of Christmas and the pagan traditions that our modern traditions evolved from, everything seemed like, I don't trust this. It read like a middle school report written by a well-meaning but very ill-informed middle school student in the early 2000s using the early 2000s internet. And this was published in, I think, the year 2000, so okay, fair. But from a published book, I kind of expect a higher quality of research than what someone would be doing for their Bristol board project at school. The sections with craft projects and recipes were either hilarious and mockable or sweet and kind of nostalgic, depending on your point of view. I have to say, in the era of Pinterest, when every DIY project I come across online looks like, oh my god, I'm never gonna be able to recreate that. That's complicated and precise and beautiful, and like, I can't do that. It was kind of fun to have someone tell me to take a styrofoam ball, stick toothpicks in it, spray paint it gold, cover it with glitter, and use it as a tree topper. It was just like, this is the sort of thing I used to read in like kids' activity books when I was a child in the early 2000s, and it's kind of fun to read that. On the whole though, this is a book where if it was longer, I probably would have DNF'd it. By the end, I was starting to get a bit frustrated with the styrofoam balls and jello salad and questionable research on a lot of things. But because it was so short, it was over before I could get too mad at it, and I guess it was kind of fun. I almost feel like you should read this more for nostalgia than for anything else at this point, but it was kind of cute. Unfortunately, the next book is another dud, and that was Hiddensee by Gregory Maguire. This is inspired by the fairy tale of the Nutcracker, which unfortunately only touches on this book slightly, and on the whole, it was not great. I will link my review up here because I've already talked enough about all the reasons I don't like this book, and we don't need any more of that negativity. Thankfully, I could clear my palate after that because I finished Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. You will not be surprised to hear that I absolutely adored this book. It was so good. I liked it so much. I had forgotten how much of a delight the ending to this book is. It's something you would never do these days, and you would never see anyone trying to do it. To end your plot just over halfway through the last book and have everything else be the characters resolving all the little threads of storyline, no one would try and do that now. If they do, let me know, because I thought that was really cool and I want to read more books like that. It worked so well. It was so good. I loved getting all the stories wrapped up and hearing about how everyone is going about making the world a better place through their creation now that they've defended it. It was so lovely. And riding that wave of good vibes from books, I read The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. I get it, guys. I'm sorry it took so long. I totally understand. This book is incredible. I loved it so much. This is set in the area that becomes part of Russia in the 1300s or 1400s, I can't remember which. And it essentially follows what happens when a stepmother and then a priest arrive in this small village and try to drive out what they see as demons. Except, of course, even though the demons are not Christian, they're just household spirits who are doing their jobs to protect the families and the horses and the home and the river and all of these things. And when the priest and the stepmother decide to drive them out of this area and this village, bad things happen because they were actually doing some stuff and they were holding back way, way scarier things. And this story follows, I think it's Vasilisa? Someone please tell me if I'm pronouncing that terribly wrong. As she strives to protect these demons and then protect her home and her family from the forces that are attacking once they're gone. It sounds incredibly simple when I describe it like that, but it's so much more complex and amazing. The characters in this were so great. Basically every character in the book is incredibly multi-sided, and even the bad guys were really interesting, and thinking about their story was just as fascinating. And even when they were being just flat out, you're being the bad guy here, you're making the wrong choice, you are doing evil things, it was still so interesting to think about why they were doing those things and where they were coming from. And on the flip side, the good characters aren't that great as people, honestly. They're better than the bad guys, of course, but especially with the male characters, I found that there was a really, really well-written nuance. For example, Vasilisa's father is depicted as a kind and a loving and caring father who wants what's best for his children, sons and daughters, and he wants to do right by them and he wants to take care of them. But he's also exactly as misogynistic as you would expect, and does some really horrible things. Not out of a place of cruelty, but just out of a place of, oh, that's what you do. And I thought it was so interesting. Something that really bothers me in historical fiction is when the good guy characters are portrayed as having modern senses of equality and justice and, you know, that sort of thing, whereas the bad guys are bad because they're horribly misogynistic and racist and awful people. Which, that can be an interesting story. I am interested in reading about people bucking societal norms and interested in reading about people fighting for what they think is right, even if it's not the status quo. But I think it's overused to make the sympathetic characters seem sympathetic and the bad guy characters seem evil. And in this book, Katherine Arden did such an amazing job of making so many of these characters incredibly sympathetic without reducing some of the horrible things they do. I was also just incredibly blown away by the writing in this book. It's amazing throughout, but it really struck me at the beginning. I read the first several chapters and then I looked up after I think 3 chapters and went, what did I just read? That was amazing. She'd set the scene so beautifully. I had such a clear sense of atmosphere. She'd introduced the characters so well. So even after a few chapters, I felt like I was really getting a sense for the personality of these characters and what they were like. And on top of all that, all of the important plot points and important events from the past that we need to know about are also put in place. And it took me a moment to realize all that because the writing did it so gracefully. The final thing I will say is that the way the story progressed was so fascinating to me. Throughout the entire book, there was this almost mounting sense of tension and dread, which I love in a book like this, where you got that feeling that something is about to happen. And it was so strong, and I was so worried about what was going to happen that at times I actually found it hard to pick the book up and read it. Except once I did, that same feeling made me so hooked and I couldn't put it down. I can't wait to read the sequels for this. I'm sure they are going to be amazing as well, and I can't wait to see where the story goes because it's so wrapped up after this one, and I'm really excited to know what adventures she has next. My next read was a nonfiction, and that was The Physics of Christmas by Roger Highfield. This is all about possible scientific explanations for Christmas phenomenon like why is Rudolph's nose red? Could it be a parasite? And then also just the science behind other Christmas things, like the science behind how does alcohol affect our bodies when we drink at Christmas parties, or things like that. This one sort of fell into a weird gap for me, where it felt a bit too science heavy to be truly light reading, and yet it didn't really explain things well enough to feel like truly in-depth science writing. Maybe this is just a change in style because this was published over 20 years ago. The concepts in this were kind of interesting. I just didn't find the execution that great, and while I didn't DNF it, I also didn't like it that much. All of that being said, the last chapter was a hilarious prediction from 1998 about what Christmas 2020 was going to look like. And while I don't have a genetically modified Christmas tree or a 3D printer that people are sending me my presents on, it was entirely virtual, and when I read that part about how everyone was gathering in like virtual reality places, okay, we weren't doing that, we were on Zoom, but that part was like, whoa, did not expect to see that so accurately represented. On Christmas Eve, I started to read Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I finished it on Christmas Day. This is the Christmas book that everyone needs in their life, or at least this was the Christmas book that I needed in my life. It is the most sweet, adorable, heartwarming collection of letters that Tolkien wrote as Father Christmas to his children in reply to their letters to Father Christmas. That was a far too complicated sentence, but I can't figure out how to say it any better, so we're rolling with that. Anyways, this book includes both images of the letters themselves and all the illustrations and paintings that Tolkien did as Father Christmas to send to his kids. And then also text of the letters because they're written in this like really complicated handwriting that frankly looks like a nightmare to read. This was just so sweet. It was so adorable. I love it so much. I had to keep pulling my partner away from whatever he was doing to read him little excerpts because it was just so cute and also at times sad. It was lovely, and if you are at all interested in Christmas, pick this one up. It's a delight, and I can't recommend it highly enough. For my other Christmas pick, I read The Sittaford Mystery by Agatha Christie. This is one of her standalone novels. In this one, we see a group of people having like a seance, but like a joke seance. They don't actually expect to talk to spirits, really. It's just sort of like, oh, this will be fun type thing. It's revealed that one of their acquaintances has been murdered. So one of the members of the party sets off. He says, okay, I'm gonna go check on this guy in the next village. I'm gonna make sure he's okay. I'm not usually into this sort of thing, but it has me kind of spooked. So he sets out, and of course, when he gets to their friend's house, the man has been murdered. And we have mystery and of course many layers of complication. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters in this one. I found both the police inspector and the amateur detective really interesting and really fun. I liked the detecting part of this book. I thought that was really well written and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I thought the ending was really disappointing. I rarely guess the ending to mystery novels. I think I have a suspicion. I think I know who did it, and then the ending comes and I'm like, whoa, did not see that. But in this one, thinking back over everything that's revealed, I feel like it was kind of a cop-out in the sense that I don't know if there was anything dropped before the ending that would let the reader figure it out at all. Like, there was nothing dropped to even cast suspicion on that character. I don't know, maybe this is my reading, maybe that's to be expected. For me, it kind of ruined a really good book when it was just like, oh, bam, by the way, this thing you couldn't possibly have expected was what happened. Part of the fun is trying to figure out if you can solve the puzzle, right? However, even the disappointing ending could not stop me from picking up another Agatha Christie as soon as I finished that one, so on Boxing Day, I immediately started reading The Murder on the Links. This is the second Hercule Poirot novel and the third that I have read. I think this one really suffers from being read almost 100 years after it was published. Because, as I said, this is the second novel featuring Poirot as the detective. And this was when Agatha Christie was just starting her career. So we see Poirot pitting himself against a detective who's very much about finding little piles of cigarette ash and minute clues and pieces of hair and stuff. And Poirot is much more about the big picture and thinking things through. And I think it was sort of supposed to show, like, look how great he is, he's really good detective. Reading it with the knowledge that Poirot is one of the great detectives of literature, however, just sort of saps any interest out of that. You know he's gonna be right. He's Poirot, he's always right. So the whole affair is just kind of annoying at that point, not intriguing. This book also opens with the narrator describing a young woman in a really gross, super male gaze, super paternalistic, super judgmental way. And that tone sort of doesn't get dropped. We keep that sort of language up throughout the book. And the narrator never does anything to redeem himself. He continues to be just annoying and stupid and kind of the worst. Add on to that the fact that Poirot is an arrogant asshole, the rival detective is kind of an arrogant asshole, the other individuals involved in the crime are kind of uninteresting and not really that present compared to the detective side. And honestly, this whole group of people just did not work for me. I understand and can appreciate books where none of the characters are that good, and that can be really interesting. But this just felt like a weird cognitive dissonance where I'm supposed to relate to these characters and I'm supposed to be sympathetic with them. And actually I'm just sitting here being like, Hastings, you moron. What are you doing? When I'm supposed to be connecting with him as, the Watson type character, it just didn't work for me. I do want to keep reading Hercule Poirot novels because I do really like Christie's writing in general usually, so I'm hoping as I progress through, maybe I'll get to something more like what I loved from Miss Marple, but we'll see. I also read an e-arc from NetGalley this month, and that was Breathtaking by Dr. Michael Stephen. This is a book all about our lungs and breathing and why lungs are super important and kind of overlooked sometimes. It goes into the history of various diseases. It looks at the modern science and the modern advancements that are being done, what treatments are being used now, and then also uses some sort of patient anecdotes to illustrate various parts. If you are questioning whether or not you should care about lungs, I challenge you to read the intro to this book and not feel like, yeah, they're pretty crucial and I should care more about mine. So that was great. I love an intro that really hooks me in, especially with nonfiction. As a reader with no science knowledge past high school, I thought the level of explanation was really good in this. There were a few points where I sort of went, yeah, okay, you don't need to explain that in so much detail, but I would rather skim those paragraphs, and when I get to something that I have far less knowledge about, have it explained really well, really clearly, so that I actually understand what's being said and can follow some of these complex topics, than have it be more sparse all the way through and go through reading it going like, you're saying these words, but I do not know what this means. So that was really well balanced. Unfortunately, due to 2020, there were a few sentences that were just laughably out of date already. Things like referring to tens of thousands of deaths from COVID. That was kind of strange and jarring to read, but I'm sure that that'll get fixed before publication. Because on the whole, it was really interesting and it was really educational. I learned a lot about lungs and how they work and all of the terrifying things that can go wrong with them. My second audiobook for the month, I don't think I mentioned, but Hiddensee was an audiobook that I listened to. But the second one was Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. This was 100% because I saw Amy of Potato Brarian talking about having reread Good Omens on audiobook and how nice that was, and I went, I also need to reread Good Omens on audiobook. Obviously, why did I not think to do that? It was so much fun. I don't have like a proper review of it or anything. Maybe I'll do that someday. It had probably been about 10 years since I first read Good Omens, and it was really fun to revisit the original book. I'd seen the Amazon Prime series last year. I thought, yeah, it'll be fun to reread the book, and then maybe I'll watch the series, and actually I was enjoying the book so much that halfway through I made my partner start the series with me, and and that was really fun. And the final book that I read in December 2020, and therefore the last book of 2020 for me, was Murder on the Ballarat Train by Kerry Greenwood. This is the third Phryne Fisher novel. As you guys know, I'm a massive fan. I've been rereading them sort of on and off, and this was just so lovely. In this one, the overnight train that Phryne is traveling on is attacked by someone who chloroforms the entire first-class carriage, then pulls out an old lady and kills her. Phryne, of course, has to solve the murder, while also dealing with multiple other cases on the side, because that's how these books work. I can't give a fair review because you guys know I love them too much, but this was a great book. It was exactly what I needed after those disappointing Agatha Christies, honestly. I was like, I want a mystery, I need a Phryne Fisher. That's what I need. And I was so right. Okay, that is all of the books I read in December. Let me know down below, what were some of your great reads of December or some of your terrible reads? What were you guys reading this month in general? As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.